Alrighty then. I'm going to go over this video is over Babel-17 by Samuel R. Delany. It was the Nebula Award winner, I believe, in 1967. Anyway, so I'm going to go into the plot summary. There are 5 sections in this book, although section 4 is super short and doesn't have that much of an effect on the overall plot. The first section is about the protagonist, the super famous poet Rydra Wong, meeting with a military general about some suspicious radio messages that led to disastrous terrorist attacks. The messages have the code name Babel-17. Rydra thereafter puts together a spaceship crew, including a pilot who had previously killed themselves and has to be brought back to life, and a navigator who is chosen due to their prowess at wrestling. Raja somehow figures out where and when the next attack will be, although how she figures that out is unclear, at least to me. Their spaceship is called the Rimbaud, after Arthur Rimbaud, which I found to be a nice touch. He's kind of my favorite poet, one of my favorite poets, someone I style my writing after. And the crew sets sail for the stars at the end of the section. The second part is about the crew arriving at a planet where that's close to the ongoing war with the invaders, who we never really meet or are given any details on who the antagonists are. Rydra is given a tour of various futuristic weapons, and the crew sits down to a meal with the government official. There's a Babel-17 attack, and the official is assassinated. The crew go back to their ship. There's a lot of cool exposition and world building in Section 2. In the third section, the spaceship suffers an explosive accident as they escape the planet from Section 2. Rydra and her crew wake up in a massive ship staffed by scavengers who seem to more or less be on the same side of the conflict as them. Rydra can now think in the Babel-17 language, because it turns out that Babel-17 is a language. The scavenger ship goes through 2 separate battles, and the second of those battles heavily damages the ship. Rydra has a long talk with a member of her crew whose native language has no words for I or you. The fourth part is maybe 10 pages. In my mass market paperback edition, it depicts the effects of Babel-17 and how it can be used to whoever is speaking it or thinking in it, how can be used to their advantage. The fifth part starts with Rydra's psychiatrist and the general from the first part looking for Rydra. Once she meets up with them, she reveals how Babel-17 works. It turns out the spy on the ship was Rydra herself, or at least I think that's what it is, as her mind had somehow compartmentalized. There's stuff about there being a spy on the ship in, I think, Section 2 and 3. Maybe it is Section 3. We get more of the Butcher's backstory. The Butcher is one of the members of the ship. At the very end, Rydra and the Butcher steal a battleship and head off to end the war. So now I'm going to summarize the world of the book and kind of go into a lot of the world building. There really isn't a lot of actual world building in this book, or at least not as much as I was expecting, and not as much as there are in works that are similar to this book, like The Three-Body Problem, which is only vaguely similar, and Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, which is very similar. Chiang obviously had read Babel-17. So humanity is spread across the stars and has made contact with alien civilizations from like 7 galaxies, I want to say. Basically, all of the sci-fi I've read is set in just one galaxy. That's how Star Wars is, for example. So I did think it was a cool and interesting detail that humanity is spread to multiple galaxies. There are a total of 9 alien civilizations in the book. 3 of them are allied with the human race, and 4 of them are part of the invaders. The invaders are the one who came up with the titular Babel-17. So we find out in the first section that Rydra's home planet is under an embargo, although the how and the why and who of the embargo is left up to the reader's imagination. The embargo does serve to ramp up the tension at the beginning, and it serves as a major obstacle that is more or less overcome kind of arbitrarily off the page. The details of the terrorist attacks that Babel-17 causes are not really specified, even when the characters are present for the attack. I do think it's implied that it causes comrades to turn on each other and stuff like that, but I'm not 100% on any of that. Like I already said, Babel-17 is a language, although the characters think it is just a radio transmission up until I think like part 3 of the book. The language causes prescience and telepathy and allows its users to think very quickly, even quicker than normal languages. and it also allows them to think in a very strategic manner. The language also overheats its user's body because it demands so much of the user's brain. Poetry is apparently massively popular in the universe of the book, so much so that the main character is a poet who is so famous that random people know of her and her work, and they've read her stuff. The poetry that's included doesn't seem particularly commercial, or at least is totally different from the type of poetry which is popular around now, like, say, motherfucking Rupi Kaur. Roger Wrong is the main character, and she's a bit of a Mary Sue, which I'll go over a little bit more later. She's a famous poet with no military experience, and she turns out to be a master strategist and a master manipulator. Her skills with strategy could be caused by her mastery of Babel-17, though it's unclear if that is actually the case or not, like whether or not she was already a strategist, or if Babel-17 made her so much better. Before the events of the book, Roger was apparently part of a throuple. It's a couple, but with 3 people. The throuple thing is depicted as more or less normal in the world of the novel. Both of Roger's partners died before the book starts, and that does explain why Rajra is kind of at loose ends at the beginning of the novel, and why she is free to pursue the plot of the novel. So now I'm going to go over 2 quotes I liked. The first one is the opening poem of the book, which is by Roger Wong. Here is the hub of ambiguity. Electric spectrums splash across the street. Equivocation knots the shadowed features of boys who are not boys. A quirk of darkness shrivels a full-mouthed senility, or pares it to a razor edge, pours acid across the amber cheek, or smashes in the pelvic arch, and wells a dark clot oozing on a chest, dispelled with motion or a flare of light that swells the lips and dribbles them with blood. They say the same crowd surges up the street and surges down again, like driftwood borne tidewise ashore and sucked away with backwash, only to slap into the sand again, only to be jerked out and spun away. Driftwood, the narrow hips and liquid eyes, the wide-flung shoulders and the rough-cast hands, the gray-faced jackals kneeling to their prey. The colors disappear at break of day, when stragglers toward the West River docks meet young sailors ambling shipward on the street. I think that's by Roger Wong. There is it says from Prism and Lens, MH. I don't know. I did really like that quote, though, even if it's not directly from the book. So now the next quote is from the tour that the government official from part 2, I want to say, he's giving Roger a tour of his collection of weapons. This is chapter 3 from part 2. Gross, uncivilized weapons. The Baron gestured toward the row of plastic cylinders increasing in size along the rack. It's a shame to waste time on such clumsy contraptions. The little one there can demolish an area of about 50 square miles. The big ones leave a crater 27 miles deep and 150 across. Barbaric. I frown on their use. That one on the left is more subtle. It explodes once with enough force to demolish a good-sized building, but the bomb casing itself is left hidden and unhurt under the rubble. 6 hours later it explodes again and does the damage of a fair-sized atomic bomb. This leaves the victims enough time to concentrate the reclamation forces, all sorts of reconstruction workers, Red Cross nurses, or whatever the invaders call them, lots of experts determining the size of the damage. Then, poof, a delayed hydrogen explosion and a good 30 or 40 mile crater. It doesn't do as much physical damage as even the smallest of these others, but it gets rid of a lot of equipment and busybody do-gooders. Still, a schoolboy's weapon. I keep them in my own personal collection just to show them we have standard fare. I'm skipping a little bit forward. Now here is one I'm justly proud of. The Baron walked to the case and the transparent walls fell apart. What, Roger asked, exactly is it? What does it look like? A piece of rock. A chunk of metal, corrected the Baron. Is it explosive or particularly hard? It won't go bang, he assured her. Its tensile strength is a bit over titanium steel, but we have much harder plastics. Then it just kind of goes on and on, where the Baron is giving Rydra a tour of all the weapons he has in his house, which, I mean, I don't know. It's not super normal for people, at least nowadays, to have atomic bombs and super powerful weapons in their house. So now I'm going to go to the book review. I was honestly expecting to like this book a lot more than I did. It shared a nebula with the flowers for Algernon, and it was nominated for a Hugo. It's definitely not as influential and canonical as Flowers for Algernon. There's a lot that was left unexplained in the book, and there's a lot that was included that was interesting and cool, but the more I thought about it, was needlessly complicated or seemingly random. Some examples would be the fact that the pilot had to be brought back to life for Rydra's mission. I didn't understand why they couldn't just choose a pilot that was already alive. I also didn't understand why they chose a navigator based on how good the navigator was at wrestling. There's also a part where magnetized marbles are used to figure out where the spaceship is that I'm not sure if that part is based on real science or not. If not, it's a kind of dumb detail, and if it is, the science is way over my head and not explained at all. As a poet myself, I have a master's degree in writing poetry, which, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, oh, how practical. But I did think it was cool that the main character of an award-winning sci-fi novel set deep in the future was a poet by vocation. But I do wish that we would have gotten more of her poetry and more about what drew her towards the writer's life. Also more about what inspired her writing and why she was so well known as a writer at such a young age. She's portrayed, I think, as being in her late 20s. And speaking of Roger being a poet, I don't necessarily see the connection between being a virtuosic poet and being capable of breaking complicated linguistic codes. Breaking linguistic codes requires logic and math skills, and being a really good writer requires a lot of reading and an innate sense of what sounds beautiful and evocative and what doesn't. If Roger is so smart and intellectual, why does she choose to make a living as a poet? Didn't really make sense to me. In my experience, poets are generally not geniuses in terms of their IQ. I'm mostly speaking of the people I went to grad school with, who a lot of them are very good poets, but I wouldn't say they have like genius level IQ. Roger is more or less a Mary Sue type character, as I've already gone over. I get that her figuring out Babel-17 was part of the plot, a big part of the plot, and it made her prescient and a superior strategist. But how she figured out the language is not delineated, and it's more than a bit unbelievable that a young poet would become such a virtuosic military mind. Rydra is portrayed as being something like a Shakespeare level of famous, and she's still in her 20s, which is not super believable. She's also stated to be autistic in the first part, but she does not show literally any autistic traits at all. She's shown to be more or less whatever the opposite of autistic is. So that detail showed a severe misunderstanding of mental health and mental disabilities on Delany's part. Overall, I felt like the book was solid, but definitely unspectacular. It surprises me that it won a Nebula, even if it was shared, although I'm not an expert on other sci-fi and fantasy releases from that year, which again I think is 1967. I probably had less problems with the book on a page-by-page level than a lot of what I've talked about would make you assume. And I'm still interested in exploring more of Delany's books, of which I have a good amount, because I go to bookstores all the time. Usually, if I have money in my account, at least once or twice a week to different bookstores. I live in a pretty big metroplex area. The grade for the book is a B/a B+. So again, it's just pretty solid. It's in some ways impressive, but it's just not amazing. Not something to write home about. Not something you're going to go to your friends and be like, oh my god, you have to read this. It's just more solid. I don't regret reading it, but I definitely also wouldn't go on a mountaintop and shout, oh my god, I love this book so much. Thanks for listening. If you could like and subscribe, I would appreciate it. Kind of. I just got a new job, so I probably won't be posting as much in the future. But if I get more likes and subscribers, I'll be a little bit more motivated to do so, to do more videos. Yeah, thanks again for listening and watching. Have a good day. Like and subscribe.